Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third round of the Marshall Chess Club Sunday Beginner Tournament. This is the third game of my recaps, and I am 1 out of 2 going into this game. I'm playing a man named Daniel with a relatively low rating. He is a beginner, an actual true beginner, unlike some of the people like me who played the tournament to probably maybe I shouldn't be playing the tournament theoretically, but I am. So I do apologize. This isn't the most instructive game in the world. Nothing. This isn't supposed to say anything against my opponent. He's a beginner. I mean that's okay. There's a massive rating gap here. Oftentimes when you see people with very low ratings, this is a USCF rating that you see here, 574. Oftentimes you see people with those ratings. That doesn't mean that they're actually that low rated in terms of strength. However, Daniel here is actually also rated below 700 in chess.com Rapid. So this was a very large rating mismatch. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about in terms of the game itself. However, I will still go through it and talk about the mistakes that he made. They're very simple mistakes, though, unfortunately, so there's not a whole lot to analyze. Excuse me. D4, D5. Another thing, I'm going to talk about this in my next game because the next game is going to be a much better example of it. But the other piece of my repertoire that I have heavily been retooling since this tournament is my repertoire against the move D4 with the black pieces. We saw in round 1 that I feel pretty comfortable playing against E4 with my Caro Kann. However, against D4, it's a lot less simple, and I've been beefing it up a lot since this tournament. However, this game doesn't show that. He plays the London system, which is extremely popular, of course, especially for people at this level, and I play C5. This is kind of my idea. There are videos online about this, the idea of C5, then like F6, E5 stuff, and trying to prepare that. In the next game, I get punished for trying to do that, and we'll talk about that then. But in this game, we don't see a whole lot of that. He plays the normal move pawn to E3, and I immediately take. C takes D4, E takes D4, knight to C6. This is very simple, very normal setup, and very flexible for black. And it's completely fine for both colors. There's nothing wrong with this setup. There are a lot of normal moves here for white. You can play C3, you can play knight F3, you could play a number of moves. Knight to F3 is almost certainly the best move, simply because the idea is you want to play the move bishop to D3, but you can't play that right now because the pawn on D4 is hanging. So it's a little bit not so simple what to play. You just have to play knight to F3. It's flexible enough, it's fine, and play continues. However, my opponent unfortunately played the move bishop to D3, which can't be played because of knight takes D4. Oftentimes in these sorts of situations, there is an idea of a discovered attack hitting the knight in various different openings, but that didn't happen here. Or it's not possible here because the knight can actually just come back, right? So bishop to b5 can't be played because the knight can come back, and the knight actually also protects the b5 square. Conceptually, this is a good idea, and oftentimes a tactical refutation of taking center pawns like this. However, in this position, it's not possible because of the other parts of the position. Unfortunately for my opponent, he had this idea and played the move bishop to b5 anyway. And because the knight is defending the square, I'm actually just up a piece on move 6. Like I said, there's not a whole lot I can do when it comes to instructive parts of this game. This game ends relatively simply and quickly from here. Normal development, knight to f3. I play bishop to g4, just pinning the knight. Maybe not the best move, but it's fine. Castles, e6, h3, takes, knight f6. Maybe bishop takes f3 isn't the most accurate move, but I'm up a piece, so simplifying can't be bad. Knight to d2. Knight to c3 in a vacuum is better, but in this position, it's understandable not to want to take that knight, for sure. And not to want to trade more material, excuse me. Queen takes means you're not losing your pawn structure, but it's still an understandable move to make. Bishop to e7. I'm actually playing this in a lot of ways like a Caro Kann. I don't know if you realize this, like an exchange Caro. Then went to e4, c6, d4, d5, takes. And this is oftentimes how I like to play those positions. Knight c6, knight f6, e6. After developing the bishop, oftentimes trading it. Bishop to e7, and castles is kind of where we're going. Knight to b3, castles, rook c1. Pretty simple. Now we're in a middle game where I'm simply up a piece, but sometimes it's not always so simple. What's the most direct way to do this? I'm probably not going to show you the most direct way to do this because I'm an intermediate level player. Ask Daniel Naroditsky, ask somebody else. But I can show you what a natural way to go about converting a position like this might look like. So I play the move knight to d6. This move has the purpose of getting a knight to e4 or to c4, a reroute, because the knight doesn't have really many prospects here. There's no forward mobility of this knight, because this knight covers the d4 square, and this pawn covers the other two forward squares. So a move like knight to d6, while not the fastest move in the world, does make sense. When I put plays knight to d4 himself, and then I play knight f to e4. See, now my pieces are a little bit more centralized, and I can go for some sort of queenside expansion, potentially. The other idea with this, as you'll see after the move queen to e2, is to play bishop to f6. Now I have this bishop on a great diagonal. It's hard for him to contest it with his own bishop, and I'm pretty happy. This knight is also hanging right now. He responds by moving the knight away, playing knight to f3. I play knight to f5. Again, forward movement with my knights, and now my piece activity is actually showing. When you're up a piece, right? At this level, it's not that impossible for you to be up a piece early in the game. In round 2, I should have been up a piece on move 9 against the higher rated opponent. So it's not bad to understand the general concepts of what you need to do in those sort of situations. Because at this level, it's extremely possible for you to still lose these games. And knowing how to convert them is still very important. You're up a piece. Use the piece. There are two different ways to win a game when you're up material. Either exchange down into a winning endgame, or use the extra piece to make a crushing attack. This is going forward in both of those potential ways. Knight to f5, the more active my pieces are, the more forced he may be to have to trade them off in the long run. Whereas, also, the closer my pieces are to his king, the more potential there is for a kingside attack. Okay. He lashes out with the move c4, an understandable move in this situation. And I play knight to d4, potentially forcing a trade here of knights. And he plays queen to d3, and we get exactly that. Knight takes f3, queen takes f3, and then I play knight to g5. Again, looking for a trade of material. I'm up a piece, there's nothing wrong with this potential way of trying to liquidate into a winning endgame where I'm up a piece. Relatively simple. Rook to d1, and he hangs his queen. This is a product of the writing mismatch. Sometimes this happens. I was already winning at this point, but it's just an unfortunate blunder on his end. Rook to d1, and knight takes f3, and at this point it's relatively elementary. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the moves. I believe he does play until checkmate. So, king to h1, queen to a5, g takes f3. I don't even bring the knight back, because the knight's actually trapped. Oh, it's not trapped, excuse me, there's this move, but I'm up a queen. It's okay. Queen to a5, gf3, queen takes a2, rook b1, dc4, rook g1. He now has this open g file, but it's not anything to actually be scared of. Rook fd8, now I want to get a plan to try to get my pieces to the second rank and win from there. He makes this very easy for me by playing the move bishop to c7 and allowing me to play the move rook to d8. The bishop used to be covering that square. I can't draw arrows. Covering that square, now it's no longer doing so. Bishop comes back to f4, rook takes f2, and now once the b2 pawn falls and it's impossible to defend, the game's going to be over. Bishop to g3, rook takes b2, rook to e1, rook d to d2, tripling up a lateral Alyakin's cannon, or Alyakin's gun, set up here. After the move bishop to c7, rook d to d2, and the game's over. I'm preparing it to sack on h2, and after bishop takes h2, rook takes h2 is, in fact, checkmate. A little bit of a fun ending to a game that there isn't a whole lot to unpack or discuss. I guess one thing to consider about the final position is that if there was a rook on d1 instead of e1, the potential for a back rank checkmate is something I have to keep in consideration. Now, obviously, that wasn't possible here for a number of reasons. The bishop on d8 and the fact that until that last move, I had a rook on d2 the entire game, basically. Or I was basically dominating the d file the entire game. That's one of the very important things to do when you have active rooks. If you have active rooks and only one open file, like there was for the vast majority of this game, you have to control it. And fighting for control of that file is extremely important when it comes to evaluating a position and who has the trumps in a position like that. And throughout a lot of this game, I had a rook kind of quickly show this. I played the move rook to d8. I didn't explain this at the time, but a large part of the idea here is the fact that there is only one open file, and I am occupying it. Bishop to c7 and rook to d2, and now this idea of dominating the open file is happening and is extremely useful. So that's, I think, all of that you can get from an instructive standpoint from this game. Unfortunately, due to the rating mismatch, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. It was a relatively simple game, but sometimes that happens. But that means I'm now 2 out of 3 in the tournament and potentially fighting for maybe not a prize, but a high placement and potential rating gain with a win in the last round of the tournament. Until then, I will I will see you then. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.